Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's a Drake album bomb episode, but also a lot of Sabrina Carpenter, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. I'm of a few minds about a new Drake album bomb in the Hot 100. I could highlight how, in comparison with previous album bombs that I've been covering for goddamn over a decade now, this does indicate a slight commercial decline. No complete dominance of the top 10, most of the entries are somewhat avoidable. It's going to be a draining episode to put together, but not an unreasonably large one, thank all the higher powers. But I'm also not going to say it's the clear indicator that Drake is over or anything like that, because you don't get over 20 new songs in the Hot 100, predominantly in R&B, on a collab project if your career is finished or anything like that. Diminished? Yeah, probably, but that might be better for overall. Especially with some of the turns in his music, I'm quite okay with Drake being part of the field rather than ruling over everything. It also helps that in the meantime, we can look at our top 10 and a new number 1, Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA, which is quite frankly a better R&B song than the vast majority of what Drake and PARTYNEXTDOOR put out. And it's also not all that surprising it went to number 1. The sales are actually up alongside dominance in streaming and strong radio gains. This was always going to get to the top spot, the question was when. And it knocks back Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar down to number 2. Also not that surprising, the streams and sales are still great, but the radio isn't remotely what it was. It was never going to have an extended run at the top even with the Super Bowl. Then we have Die With a Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars actually gaining a spot to number 3. The sales are up and it's rock solid on streaming and the radio, although it can't quite muster the push to get to the very top on airplay. More on that in a little bit. It was still enough to climb past TV Off by Kendrick Lamar featuring Lefty Gunplay at number 4 though. I chalk this up to better sales than expected, supporting great streaming and a real push for radio traction, and Squabble Up by Kendrick at number 5, which has now been comfortably overtaken across the board, at least by TV Off. And yet it's still held up over our first new top 10 arrival, Gimme a Hug by Drake at number 6. We'll get into this one a lot later, but it's not surprising it debuted this high, with Drake's most pronounced rap performance from the album with great streams and even a little bit of a radio push, although there seems to be some confusion surrounding what's getting that push from Drake, more on that in a bit as well. It got up over Apartment by Rose and Bruno Mars, holding at number 7. Bit of an odd case there because it had a great sales week but was also losing on streaming and the radio, just not as quickly as some of the peers, which takes us to Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish, falling past it at number 8 because really it's losing slowly across the board. Then we got a bar song, Tipsy by Shaboozey at number 9. It's still holding the top spot on the radio, but it's basically got nothing else. And then our second new top 10 entry, Nokia by Drake at number 10. And this is where I'm noting a little bit of confusion because this sold incredibly well and the streams are pretty damn good, but there's no radio push and it's more pop friendly. And given Drake is sending records to the radio, it's a little odd that there's not a focused effort to run up the hits here. I mean, he knows how to do it. It's a science. That's what Drake does. Well, anyway, Losers and Dropouts, and not many of the latter really worth talking about, believe it or not. Many of the songs that fell away just never got going properly, with the biggest being Diet Pepsi by Addison Rae and 2 songs from Bad Bunny, El Club and Will Tito with Chewy. And when we get to our losers, oh dear God, it's over 40 songs, nearly half the Hot 100. So let's keep this reasonable on myself. We got a long episode ahead. Let's focus on what matters and the songs that are outside of the top 10 that didn't get knocked around that hard. The majority in the top 20 because Drake did not have as much penetration up there as he usually does. There's a dick joke there somewhere. And that means we got a lot of established songs. Pink Pony Club by Chaperone, momentarily out of the top 10 at 11. Lose Control by Teddy Swims at 12. Beautiful Things by Benson Boone at 13. 2 Kendrick Lamar and SZA collaborations in a row with 30 for 30 at 14 and All the Stars at 15. That's So True by Gracie Abrams at 16. Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter at 17. Love Somebody by Morgan Wallen at 19. And I Had Some Help by Post Malone featuring featuring Morgan Wallen at 20. After that, it gets substantially shakier. Taste by Sabrina Carpenter at 22. Chalk this one holding up to the deluxe release. We'll get to a lot of that as well. See also Bedchem holding strong at 39. I'm the Problem by Morgan Wallen dropping but not fast enough at 23. Timeless by The Weeknd and Playboi Carti at 24. Messy by Lola Young managing to actually hold on at 28. Too Sweet by Hozier at 34. Goo by Jimin at 44. Liar by Jelly Roll at 51. Worst Way by Riley Green getting some Nashville radio support up to 78. Push to Start by Tyla at 92. And Mutt by Leon Thomas at 97. So what returns and gains managed to happen this week amidst the flood? Well, believe it or not, we only got one of each. And they're both from Sabrina Carpenter because of that deluxe release. In the returns, we got Juno back at 100. Not gonna complain, that song is great. And the one game we got is Please 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 at 25, probably off that really bad remix with Dolly Parton that I somehow like even less. But again, the big story here, it's the album bomb for Some Sexy Songs for You, which is absolutely in the territory where I only need to consider the top 20 the best and yeah, the worst. So with all that in mind, outside of those, Glorious at 83, On My Way at 74, When He's Gone at 73, Greedy at 70, Celibacy at 66, Lasers at 60, Brian Steele from Just Drake at 47, Pimmie's Dilemma with Really Just Pimmie at 45, then 3 more songs with Just Drake and Raining in Houston at 43, Small Town Fame at 40, and Crying in Chanel at 37, then Spider-Man Superman at 35, then Deeper from Just Party Next Door at 31, and let's round it all out, Somebody Loves Me at 30, Mothballs at 29, and Something About You at 26. Alright, this thankfully makes the week a little bit more manageable, so now getting on with our new arrivals, and we're not starting with Drake. Number 87, Bad Reviews by Sabrina Carpenter.
Bad reviews, couple, bad gut feelings, well, I've had them too, but still I choose to be in love with you.
Okay, we got 4 new Sabrina Carpenter songs to get through amidst the onslaught of Drake and Party Next Door, and I had some initial skepticism when I saw that title as someone who has been, well, lukewarm on Sabrina Carpenter at best in my reviews. Turns out that's not what this is. Kinda wish it was. As amidst some very gentle acoustic guitars and strings courtesy of Jack Antonoff's production, that's trying for something close to country in the composition down to that gentle 2-step fiddle break alongside some flashier horns, Sabrina Carpenter is trying to ignore all the bad reviews and misgivings around her current partner to then be in love. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but throughout Short and Sweet, the person who was giving the majority of the bad reviews to her partner was Sabrina Carpenter herself. It did not sound like a healthy relationship, it sounded like she knew that, and this sure as hell does not sound good either. Purposefully ignoring the red flags, cutting off your friends who question it, the whole cutesy self-awareness that this is all a bad idea because of his known issues. I get that this is supposed to be kind of melodramatic and funny and as it just goes over the top, but it makes the tone of the rest of the album's relationship woes really hard to contextualize. I don't know, maybe some of this is coming from the baggage that I personally have from some legit bad relationships in my past, but the joke here, it's not landing, and Sabrina Carpenter's dating down stories are really rubbing me the wrong way, and the pop country gets a lot less cute with this arc in the meantime. So yeah, I don't think it's good. Not a fan. Number 85, Por Esos Ojos by Fuerza Regida. Hey look, the only song debuting not by either Drake or Sabrina Carpenter just so happens to come from one of my least favorite regional Mexican acts. Fun stuff. And normally my critique of a lot of material in this genre is that it starts running together, and that's not something I'm gonna say for this, because there's actually a lot going on here. From the painfully brittle spare acoustics that open up the song before we get the a cappella opening that then erupts into all the farting horns, and the very pronounced bass line, the last of which kind of feels feels very wonky integrated with any sort of groove, especially in the midsection, with the production then giving their frontman a lot more reverb on his voice and even little melodic twinkles that are added into the hook. It sounds a lot more expensive and polished, but in a very cluttered way. Very little given the chance to properly breathe, but you know what, the polish kind of makes sense when you then translate the lyrics and realize this is a lot more of a straightforward love song for Fuerza Regida, where despite all of his monetary success, he traded all for some girl. Melodramatic? Yeah, sure, but honestly it feels a little bit more sincere than what we normally get from these guys. Still not really my thing, but I think I'll at least remember it a bit more. That's worth highlighting, I guess? Number 84, Couldn't Make It Any Harder by Sabrina Carpenter.
When I let you touch me, you say you can take it, but you don't know how hard I can make it.
So given Sabrina Carpenter's sense of humor, I immediately identified the dick joke here that gets some interesting recontextualization on the hook. She's burned out and disillusioned by so many California fuckboys. Sabrina Carpenter is pushing away someone who might actually be fine for her or maybe would have been at a different time, but she knows that given the state she's in right now, she'd make it hard for him to stay in the relationship. You want it to feel easy. And you know what, on this? She's actually completely right. Not sure why she thought it was a good idea to call herself so reactionary on the second verse, especially given some of the underlying gender politics on Short and Sweet, or how this song feels like it's borrowing compositionally from Hopelessly Devoted to You from Grease. But you know what? That's the other thing. The tone and the subtext of this song is distinctly odd. They load up the hook with the coy pin-up sexual entreaties and the dick jokes, but then flipping it on their head in order to be a little sadder, but also purposely highlighting how much you want her anyway. I think I see the game that's being played. Kind of a shame because I actually really like the composition and production here. The soft focus acoustics and bass leads into a vintage pop soul waltz, complete with perfect backing vocals for a great melodic switch up for the hook. In other words, I kind of want to like this a lot more than I do. Although, if we are looking for the better version of this joke, look up You Make It Hard by Hot Country Nights featuring Terry Clark. It's from 2020. You'll thank me later. Number 67, 15 Minutes by Sabrina Carpenter. Okay, what the hell is up with that guitar tone? It's trying to go for some warping new disco, but it sounds like it's gargling around a groove that's otherwise much more prim and polished with all the strings and the cooing backing vocals. It's really distracting for me. Kind of a shame because the groove is actually pretty decent, and Sabrina Carpenter is singing about something that's not tied to relationships, more examining the shelf life of her fame and success, where she plans to do a lot with the limited time that she has in the industry, full of backbiting phonies who think that she's just some airhead pop star, down to knowing exactly how to sustain her relevance when she does slip into the decline, through maybe leaking photos or saying insane shit for the press. And again, I actually kind of believe her. I have had a lot of issues with Sabrina Carpenter for years now, but I was never thinking she was stupid. Even if the songs are dumb, there's always that wink to the audience to let you know she is in on the joke, and this song is no exception. In other words, minus that ugly guitar, pretty decent track. Definitely appreciate some of those minutes. It's worth hearing. Number 63, Meet Your Padre by Drake, PARTYNEXTDOOR, and Chino Pacas.
Bonita, bien lo sabes, y esa forma de mirarme en tus ojos.
Whose idea was this? I have to ask because whoever suggested this to Drake and Party should not only be fired into Lake Ontario, but might just be the mole that was leaking everything to Kendrick Lamar and the beef. Because I have not heard a self-sabotaging catastrophe like this in some time. The Drake stans don't like it, the podcasts that like Drake can't defend it, not even the fans on Genius like this, and they like damn near everything. To quote the highest rated comment in Genius, in all due honesty as a Mexican, this is a garbage fire of a track. What are those accents? This almost feels racist. But I don't even think that does it justice, because in the middle of your slow burn R&B album, you have a phoned in regional Mexican song with Chino Pacas, not one of the better acts in the scene, where Drake tries to inject Spanish into his verse and it sounds about as bad as well, shit, whenever I attempt Spanish in these videos. I get why to native speakers it's wince-inducing. I hear the cringe now. And the production is just this muted acoustic guitar that really sounds out of tune, and some more textured patter that doesn't remotely match the auto-tune drizzled over everything, and we're not even at the content yet, where so much of the song is about asking the parents' permission. Are we doing Magic's Rude now? And Drake saying the girl's body is like Coca-Cola as he pays her rent and taxes, and Party calls himself Fiesta Next Door. So not only is this an atmosphere-destroying element on the album, it's doubling down on the cultural appropriation where there isn't anything close to a credible excuse. This is that episode of Glee calling out Will Schuester as a Spanish teacher level of humiliating, on the tier of Wagwan Delilah from last year, where even if your excuse is, okay, Drake spent some time in uptown New York City hitting on Puerto Rican girls because Bad Bunny won't return his calls, there's nothing suave or composed here, and it's too gutless to have any attitude or actual flair. It might not be the worst song of 2025 because, oh god, we're still in February, but there are a few things I have heard that are this embarrassing. Jesus, skip this. Number 27, Busy Woman by Sabrina Carpenter.
Let you come into my calendar any night. But if you want my kisses, I'll be your perfect missus till the day that one of us dies.
So this appears to be what's getting the big push as the song from the deluxe release, and one that's already gotten her in some hot water for that line on the second verse, if you don't want me, I'll just deem you gay. And yes, I get that she's somewhat joking on a very capricious song where she just wants someone to be as invested in her in the relationship because she is so busy all the time, at least someone to match her level. But it reminds me of the same breezy main character self-importance that's always really irked me about Carpenter's writing. If you are so busy and, I don't know, someone doesn't want to handle that, that's not indicative of their sexuality. You're not as irresistible as you seem to think you are, especially when this literally follows couldn't make it any harder on the deluxe issue track listing. I get wanting commitment from a relationship. That's ideal, especially given how desperately she seems to want something passionate and real on her terms. But here is just a bad joke, and it doesn't land alongside to turn me down that's just unethical, and it's not helped by the production, which has this very shrink-wrapped 80s plasticity to it with the flashy synths and blocky percussion and Jack Antonoff on the vocoder, alongside Sabrina Carpenter doing her best Ariana Grande impression. In other words, yeah, I think I'm entirely okay with all of these songs that have been cut from short and sweet, or at least the vast majority of them, because this ain't good either. Number 21, Die Trying by Drake, PARTYNEXTDOOR, and Yebba.
Even say goodbye, it's killing me inside. If I could just get next to you, I'd probably be alright. But we're so busy in this life, we always say some other time.
Alright, if there's gonna be one song I'll defend from this Drake and Party project, it is this. Even then, it kind of sounds like a SZA ripoff with the liquid acoustic guitars, and it's impossible to ignore how the auto-tune smothering the vocals just doesn't blend well with more organic instrumentation, especially with Party's post-chorus where he seems to be blaming the girl's friends for pulling them away from him, rather than the public service that it probably was, which is echoed by Yebba's dejected outro, which really should have served as a stronger counterpunch than all the projection here. Maybe give her a bridge or something. But it's actually Drake that kind of sticks the landing. He sounds emotionally drained. He can't even cry. He's drinking with his dad who's telling him the hoes don't love him, and the future of all this sounds like it's going down the drain. And for a moment, you get a snapshot of a man realizing that none of this is okay. Apropos meta text for basically the entire album, or really the last couple of years of Drake's career. It's the closest thing towards moving on or growing up that this album attempts, and it is better for it. If more of the romantic tracks on this album were in this lane, I'd like it a hell of a lot more. But as it is, yeah, I'll say it. Good song. It's worth hearing. Number 18, CN Tower by Drake and PARTYNEXTDOOR.
What color's the CN Tower? Red tonight. Just like the text I sent you from the bed tonight. Read it cause I finally think I said things right.
Alright, as a bunch of you know, I've been living in Toronto for over a decade, but more importantly, I live downtown. So at any given moment, I can walk to a place where I can easily see the CN Tower. Maybe even walk to it or go up it if I wanted. Now for those of you who don't know, depending on what sports teams are doing well, the tower gets lit up with those colors. And Drake in the song is using those colors to correlate with certain emotions and this missed relationship connection. Hell, I actually think the opening line in the hook is decent. The city is pretty when it's dead, just like a flower. I mean, it's pretty basic melodramatic R&B poetry about lost love, but downtown Toronto can be pretty when nobody's on the streets late at night. I know that from experience. But man, the rest of the song should be much better than it is. The goddamn concern trolling to end off that verse where he says that she's not really happy. The watery non-melody as the percussion feels so goddamn brittle and both of them are smothered in auto-tune, which for emotional distance might make sense if it wasn't the utterly draining aesthetic of so much of this album, and also if it didn't feel so awkwardly compressed and tinny. And by the time Party takes over, the atmosphere is just not coalescing at all. So yeah, more mediocre than bad, but I hear what it was trying to do at least. I get why someone might like it. Number 10, Nokia by Drake.
Is it Esos? Is it LP? Was it Dante? Is it Party? Where's the function?
Where the fuck the function? Where the fuck the function?
Anyone get the feeling that Drake really wishes he was back in the mid to late 2000s right now, preferably in Memphis, where you could get away with such chintzy synths for a breezy but sterile pop rap dance song, where you can croon rap over something this weedy, which somehow starts sounding even more dated and canned when it switches up to that oily breakdown around the uncredited L-Can, who, let's be real, sounds like somebody doing a parody of 80s rap shoutouts. Because look, I remember the mid to late 2000s. I was there, and also how bleak it was for mainstream rap coming out of the ringtone era. And I remember when Drake seemed to represent something fresh with better production to boot over 15 years ago, instead of this rote club nonsense where he can run through a list of names and then try to pick up a girl, where on the first verse, after she seems to be leaving and going elsewhere, can't blame her, he references all the guns that his crew brought into the club. That could be taken as a threat, dude. What the hell? But there's no attitude or swing to this. It's just corny when you get lines like, I'ma ice both of y'all like Gretzky. Drake, you're in Toronto. You've probably been to a hockey game, or maybe even watched one. You know icing's a penalty, right? How is your wordplay only getting dumber? Yeah, it'll probably get some dance traction with TikTok. Knowing our luck, it's gonna be a hit somehow. But man, folks, have some standards. This is crap. Skip it. And finally, number 6, Gimme a Hug by Drake.
Have a little bit of patience. Drizzy, you amazing. You the inspiration. You set the bar for the next generation. You Neo in the Matrix. These niggas just Nemo in the ocean. Small fish making kids feel emotion.
Okay, I'm torn on this one. On the one hand, it's arguably Drake's most strident rap song on the album. The soul chop allows Drake to build a pretty good crescendo. He has tangible energy. The beat switches are all executed pretty well, especially into that Aaron Hall sample. And there is some decent wordplay as he wants to move on from the rap beef that he lost and then get back to the strip club. You know, keep making us dance, wave our hands, and there won't be no threat. But you can also very plainly tell that Drake is not over it and hasn't really learned what he should have coming out of the beef. There are still subs being made at Kendrick Lamar's direction with the girls twerking with the dictionary, as if a lot of women don't love lyrics. They may be just the women around you right now, Drake. Also, absolutely no culpability in what he himself instigated in the beef. And to top it off, shooting at adversaries through women like with Joe Budden through shouting out Melissa Ford. That's fucking corny, Drake. Get past it. And as the song continues, the vibe just sours painfully. You might claim you're stuck in your ways and getting the clubs lit as the perpetual bachelor, where you know all the strippers by name and you're looking at the younger girls in Nike tights. But as he shouts out, "Give me a hug," I was reminded most of two things. The first was the incidental Drake and Josh line, which, oh god, that's not an association you want right now. But the more prominent one, it's the older guy who hits up the club way too much and always wants to greet everybody by demanding they give him a hug. Drake, nobody likes that guy. For a song that's trying to sound so triumphant, I should not feel this embarrassed and sad. Never has saying I'm stuck in my ways felt like more of a self-own than this. And yeah, that's our week. Let's handle the worst immediately. Meet Your Padre by Drake, Party Next Door, and Chino Pacas is gonna take that without question. With dishonorable mention, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna say it, Nokia, because man, it sounds so dated and awful and sterile, although Busy Woman by Sabrina Carpenter was sure as hell close. Best of the week, yeah, very slim pickings here. I'm gonna go with Couldn't Make It Any Harder by Sabrina Carpenter, pretty much on composition. I don't think the tone really works both in the song and in the context of the album, and the lyrics are not great, but it sounds really nice, and that gives it just enough of an edge over Die Trying with Drake, Party Next Door, and Yebba. Next week, oh my god, the fallout from this is gonna be a headache and a half. Stay tuned, I guess. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.